All right, speak.
How you doing there this evening? My name is Edward Avalos. I was born in Torrance, California, raised in Harbor City, California. I'll be 67 years old next month.
All right, so these are the questions that we're gonna go with. Um, and you could, incorporate some other things if you want, and I'll go ahead and probably try to incorporate some other things. But this is how it goes. This is the first question, and is how has the local community changed over time? And please be specific about what part of the city you're referring to.
Well, being raised in Harbor City, California, it was a close knit community. The brown people, black people, the Italians, the Samoans, a few Asians. Um, Over time, over a period of time, things changed over the years. It was a beautiful city back in the days. Growing up as a kid, a lot of fun things to do. We used to ride bicycles all the time. The old rule was be in the house by the time the street lights turned on, and that held true. Uh, we had a lot of good times back growing up as kids. We had open fields. We go rabbit hunting. Like I said, riding bikes. We had big fields where we would build big old mounds of dirt just so we had jumps to go off of. There was a lot of times we would, put coins on the railroad tracks, and as we got older, we got brave, and we would jump on the railroad, on the train itself, and ride until they stopped it and told us to get off the train. It's just a lot of fun things we did as kids back then. Go down to Harbor Lake, and stuff like that. Go fishing, just exploring. In our early teens, we used to build rafts and sail through the channel that would go from PCH all the way over to the other side of Lomita Boulevard. There was one of the oil derrick pumps there, and we used to call that 00 Island. We would have battles with each other, knock each other off their rafts, and try and claim the island. That was some of the fun things we used to do.
So, as a young Chicano living in the area, how was life for you? Besides that,
It was good. I mean, you managed. I was kind of fortunate that I was raised by my grandparents.
hmm
My mother lived on the other side of the railroad tracks, which back in the days you had the poor side of town and the upscale part of town. And I did have the opportunity to go to school on the upper side of town. Um, I attended school at Harbor City Elementary School from kindergarten up until about the fourth grade. Then um, I was transferred to Normont Terrace Elementary School in what we call the barrio part of town where I was living. And I went to school there from the latter part of the fourth grade into the mid part of the fifth grade. And then I went back to Harbor City Elementary School, and stuff like that. Um, I had friends of all ethnicities. Like I said, it was a mixed group of people growing up there in town. I knew people on one side of the tracks, and I knew people on the other side of the tracks. So as I grew older, I knew people and things like that. Um, as far as the diversity, it was all there. It was good. Growing up, it was good. Unlike today, it's a lot different out there today. It's out of control. It's dangerous. We have a lot of people that have come in from other countries that have changed the dynamics of what we knew growing up, and stuff like that. So I don't know. I was pretty fortunate living with my grandparents. We had what we called our little farm. We had goats, rabbits, chickens, pigs, whatever. Uh, we had plenty of fruit trees there on the property, and I'm talking about a small lot within the city, but that small lot was big growing up.
yeah.
I learned how to raise rabbits. The gentleman that lived behind us, Mr. Solis, he taught me how to build a rabbit condo. It was like multiple pens to separate your rabbits in, for breeding, for, the ones that are getting ready to go to the pot. So just we were responsible. My responsibilities as a kid was to go out, make sure that our animals had water, give them a little food. You know, before I even got to go to school, I had my chores and stuff like that, and then I'd come home, clean up, clean the pens out, whatever. So yeah, it was different.
You talked about there being, two sides, and how it differed from, once you cross the railroad tracks. What would you say were the major differences for people living on each side?
You had the lower income people living on one side of the tracks. Then you had your up more financially stable people living on the other side of the tracks. My father, you know, he bought the home that my mother lived in, which is the home I'm living in now. He bought this one as well, but he had bought in that home when him and my mother got married. He was in the military and stuff like that, and he bought it on that side of the railroad tracks because at that time he wanted what was best for me and my sister. I have a younger sister. Um, Unfortunately, they divorced when I was about 4 years old, and I never saw him after that. I think I was like 14 years old when I saw him, and all he did was talk crap because by that age, I was already involved in running the streets, So I couldn't live with my mother because I didn't get along with the gentleman she ended up with after my father. He was very abusive, so physically, so I went to my grandparents and they told me just stay here with us, so me and my brother underneath my sister were raised by my grandparents. And then my sister and my youngest brother, who was fathered by that gentleman, were raised by my mother.
Okay. Would you say that living in that specific neighborhood affected the way that, some of the choices that you made, throughout your life, whether it was, you know,
Maybe if I hung out on the other side of the tracks a little bit more, I wouldn't have got into half the crap I got into living in the barrio. You know, but it was kind of different because everybody I hung out with was related to me one way or another. They were cousins or married into the families and stuff like that. So, to me, we were just one big mixed family out there. There are people I went to school with, I grew up with, I played with, and stuff like that. Like when I went to the other side, I would see a lot of my friends from that side of town down at the beach, surfing, whatever, fishing, and or just out hanging out, whatever, and stuff. So there was the same lifestyle on both sides of the tracks, but one was sugar coated and the other one was straight out what it was,
yeah.
you know. But to see both sides of that fence, they had the same characteristics. It's just some made it look better and innocent, while the other ones didn't give a shit. They were happy living the way they did.
What spaces, physical, cultural, economic, have been lost or gained since you were a kid till now?
I've watched that infamous eminent domain come in and destroy everything you knew as far as homes being ravaged, just a lot of different things that they made changes in. Uh, there was a time where we had a council member, supposed council member, who had written some different laws for the properties, rezoning properties and stuff like that. They drew a line unbeknownst to all the families that lived in that zone. And when it came to a point where they wanted to do upgrades to their homes and stuff, they were told they couldn't because it had been written that they were now manufactured in a manufacturing area. So a lot of people ended up, just selling out their properties and stuff like that because, pretty much they were preventing people from doing any upgrades because they didn't want you doing anything to your property. They wanted to take and wipe out that whole section of housing.
So talk more about the eminent domain and how, like, if it affected you or if it affected any other family members from that you knew or that you
Yeah,
had.
I've seen a lot of families leave and stuff like that. A lot of we had a gentleman. His name was Elliot, and I mean, I could talk bad about the way he did things, but he would go to people with a briefcase full of cash, three times what they paid for their properties, four times what they paid for their property. A lot of these places they were sold for $12,000. A lot of these families, their homes, because they were like second, third generation families living in them homes, and the original buyers, their grandparents, whatever, bought them homes, anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000. And this gentleman, with the upcoming market and stuff, he would go in there and he'd drop a suitcase, $50,000 cash. I'll give you $50,000 cash for your property. Well, these elderly people, to them, they're like, wow, that's a lot of money. But they really didn't know what the market was out there because they had never gone out to look at anything else. So, this gentleman took full advantage of a lot of people's naiveness, not understanding what they were actually getting themselves into. And I saw several properties in the areas surrounding us sell. And then in turn, he ended up having manufacturing buildings put up and stuff like that. So, little by little, the neighborhood was changing, you know, and it just, to me, it was dirty the way he did it. It was dirty. Because I came home one day and my uncle walked in right behind me and he was in the house. And my grandmother's sitting there and he's at the dining room table and he opens his briefcase and we're looking, he's like got all this cash. We're like, what the hell? And I looked at my uncle and my uncle told me, you need to get the frick out of my house now. Get out of my mother's house now. And what were you, and it literally got to where it would have become a physical thing had he not had enough sense to get up and go.
Yeah.
But that's how he did it. He took advantage of a lot of families. Like now, there's only what, one, two, three, four, five houses left standing on that block. And there was 16 homes on that block. There's only like five left. And they're all industrial buildings now. So, it was like this block and this block and this block and this block and this block, and that changed the dynamics of lifelong families there, and the elderly, they thought they were coming out ahead, but then when it was all said and done, they couldn't afford to buy nothing else. A lot of them would end up in Compton, or a lot of them would go out to the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, places that were very cheap still to purchase, and their money would just barely get them a home, but, stuff like that started changing the neighborhood. Then, as time went on, they started bringing in apartments. People were buying homes on the other side of Normandy Avenue, the east of Normandy. They were buying all the homes there, knocking them down and building apartments. Then again, too, I don't know who the investor groups were or whatever, but they were doing the same thing. The people there didn't know the true value of their property, and they would sell